looking at all these women coming into these factories, they're thinking these women can't, do as good of a job, and they're actually surprised. There's a quote here from a male worker who is surprised that the women are doing such a good job. So there were these women in these assembly lines, in factories where they're all lined up and having to work really quickly to build something. These women were breaking production records because they were doing the job really well and quickly. Okay, next slide. And so, one woman said it's a tragedy that it took a war for us to show that we can do as good of a job in these factories as the men can do. Okay, there's more quotes you can read on this slide if you want. This is a picture of one of the American women at the time who's working on a dive bomber, okay, so a type of airplane, that's designed to do dive bombing. Okay, next slide. Now, in the end, the Allied powers, which is Russia, or also known as the Soviet Union at this time, France, England, United States, okay, those are the Allies, they defeat Germany, okay? Remember, Italy had also been allied with Germany. Italy kind of drops out, sees that the other side is going to win, and Italy's kind of fed up anyway with the whole thing. And so at some point during the war, Italy sort of switches sides, actually. And then what happens with Hitler is he sees that the end is near. He sees that he's not winning. The Americans and the Russians are moving in and starting to have the upper hand, starting to really defeat the Germans. And Hitler commits suicide. And then you have Germany surrendering in May of 1945. Now, what happens is, think about the map. The Russians are moving in from the east towards Poland and Germany. The Americans have landed on the beaches of France and the beaches of Italy, and the Americans are moving up through Italy, moving across France into Germany as well. So the Americans are coming in from the west and the south. The Russians are coming in from the east. And what the Russian and American armies are finding is they're finding the concentration camps where the Germans had put the Jews. And an absolute horror awaits them. Okay, next slide. So, the concentration camps, okay? Remember, the Nazis were suppressing any opposition to their regime. And they also were seeing the Jews as, Hitler had his own personal issue with Jews, which we can talk about in class when I come back. But he creates these concentration camps, and the first one was in 1933, and these camps grew and grew. They were all over places like Poland and all over Germany. They weren't just for Jews, okay? Hitler had a problem with handicapped people. He had a problem with homosexuals, with people who were mentally ill. There was all kinds of people that he put in these concentration camps. He was wanting to create what he called an Aryan race, okay? An Aryan race is a race of people that are basically white-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde-haired. Okay, Hitler was crazy because Hitler was not even blue-eyed and blonde-haired. Okay, he was darker, and there's some possible evidence that he might have even had Jewish ancestors. But he wants to create this Aryan race, or what he also called a master race. Okay, so he doesn't like anyone who doesn't fit that, and they're all shoved into these concentration camps, and most of them die. Okay, next next slide. So the term Holocaust, as you'll see on this slide, this is a term you need to know, okay, for exams and things like that in this class. What that term refers to is the systematic annihilation of 6 million Jews during World War II at the hands of the Nazis. Okay, what is systematic annihilation? Okay, to annihilate is to wipe out. Okay, so systematically wiping them out, meaning you're very organized about it. You've thought this through, okay? You're going to every city, rounding up all the Jews, putting them on trains, like cows, okay? Not a nice train with a seat, but in what we call the cattle cars, right? Where they're shoved in like animals, and they're transported to these concentration camps, and they don't come out alive. They're never going to see home again. So you have, by the end of the war, 2 out of every 3 Jews have been killed. So this is what we call the Holocaust. Okay, next slide. Now, we're talking about whole families, okay? There's no care put towards whether these are really elderly men and women, whether these are little boys and girls, okay? They're all systematically terminated or annihilated, okay? So estimates, we don't really know exact numbers. We're estimating 1.5 million murdered children, if you want to just think about the children. Now, okay, so I'll just quickly tell you, I actually visited the concentration camp of Majdanek, which was one of the camps in Poland, and I saw, for example, these piles of tiny little shoes from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children who had been exterminated in these camps. Okay, they had these just huge piles of shoes, like from the floor up to the ceiling. And the whole thing was, you know, turned into a museum, but left just the way it was. So you could see the ovens with the ashes from when the Nazis would burn the bodies of the Jews, and it definitely happened. I know sometimes people question whether it happened, but the Americans, when they arrived and saw these camps, they filmed what they saw, and we have original film footage from the American armies, which you'll see on this PowerPoint. Okay, next slide. Now, Majdanek, on this third bullet point here, that's the camp that I visited that was preserved, and so it's one of the best preserved of the concentration camps. Another famous one is called Auschwitz that a lot of people will visit today to get a sense of what happened. The Nazis were trying to destroy the evidence of these camps before the Russians and Americans arrived, but they weren't able to destroy the evidence at all these camps. Okay, next slide. So here's some information about that particular concentration camp, Majdanek, that I visited, with just numbers of how many prisoners were sent and how many died. So you can look at these slides on your own. These are some pictures. The piles of the bodies, the ovens, and I can talk to you more about details when I'm back in class with you. Okay, next slide. There were some crazy, bizarre medical experiments that German doctors were doing on people at these camps. There was one famous doctor called Joseph Mengele who was given the name the Angel of Death. He was at the camp of Auschwitz, and he was doing medical experiments on twins. This was all part of Hitler's very strange idea about the master race, the Aryan race. He was trying to figure out, how do you breed more people that are blonde and blue-eyed, and he had these just freaky doctors doing these freaky experiments, often, well, almost, I think always, without anesthesia, Really crazy stuff. Here's a picture of the way some of the children looked who were in these camps, obviously starving, and Mengele was doing these really horrible, bizarre experiments on them. Okay, change the slide, please. These are comments from prisoners who survived the camps. Not a lot of people survived, but some people did when the Americans and Russians showed up and liberated these camps. There were people that, in fact, when I visited Majdanek in the 1980s, I was able to talk with someone who had survived one of these camps. Okay. Now, this is a video I want you to watch on your own. After you're done listening to my lecture here, you should go back into this PowerPoint and watch this video. Okay. Now, these two, this is where you're going to do a reflection for me. These are videos from the liberation of these camps. Like I said, the Americans actually took some video footage. We've got old black and white video footage from the American Army arriving and what they found and how horrifying it was. I want you to look at these two videos and do a 5-minute reflection on one of them. Do the you know how to do the usual reflection, okay? Just what stands out to you, your reaction, okay? Just write for 5 minutes based on these videos, and then bring it to me for when we meet in class the following week, okay? And then lastly, if you're interested in the story of this Dr. Joseph Mengele, who was called the Angel of Death, who did these bizarre experiments in the camps. This talks about how he escaped when Germany lost the war. Joseph Mengele was able to escape and get to South America, and there were Jewish people who tried really hard to bring him to justice, to find him in South America and make him stand trial back in Europe. This never happened. People kept trying to find him, and he kept moving around different places in South America. So that's kind of an interesting story if you want to look at that. Okay, keep going, keep going. Okay, so finally, like I said, the Americans really helped turn the tide of the war and helped to win it. Like I've said a couple times already, without the Americans, it wouldn't have happened. France and England and the Soviet Union probably wouldn't have been able to win. So the German forces surrender in 1945, and so the Allies have won. Okay, the Soviet Union, and also known as Russia. Hopefully you know what I mean when I say the Soviet Union. They, along with the Americans and the British and French, have won the war. Japan still didn't surrender. The U.S. was still fighting, so the war ends in Europe, but the U.S. is still fighting Japan in the Pacific. Now, we're going to spend a couple classes later talking about how the Americans developed the atomic bomb and how and why they decide to drop it on Japan to finally end the war in the Pacific as well and force Japan to surrender. Okay. So these outcomes at the end of the war, I'll talk more about when we meet in class together. Let's just look at is there one more slide on here? No, okay. So yeah, so the outcomes of the war we'll talk about more. So just email me if you have any confusions, but the main assignment is just, after you've viewed me here and reviewed the PowerPoint, look at those two videos I mentioned, do your 5-minute reflection, bring it next week with you to turn it in class. Okay? Thanks.